What's up, everybody? My name is Paul DiNuzzo, or PLD, sometimes Paulie D.
And I'm the guy with the weird European accent. I'm Richard-Erik Jarvi, aka Dick Jarvi. That's what's happening today. And together, we're Class Action. Tell us, PLD, what is Class Action?
Thanks, Richard. Class Action is our show here on the Action Industries YouTube channel, where we will take two related topics. They could be movies, franchises, actors, directors, etc. And we help with the help of 5 custom-made categories. We pit them up against each other, and then we get to judge which one is victorious. And we call this little segment, the meat of the show, Class Action Brief of the Week. And this week's Class Action Brief of the Week is 2 little submarine movies from the 1990s, one of my favorite eras of film. We got 1990s, John McTiernan's The Hunt for Red October, first of the Jack Ryan movies. We're pitting it up against a similarly colored poster, movie, Tony Scott's Crimson Tide, Danger Runs Deep.
God, that's a sweet tagline.
I love that tagline so much.
And if the brief of the week involves or is inspired by a recently released film, we also provide a small review or first thoughts on the movie. But if the brief involves 2 older films, like in this case, we will take a look at the films in a different way. And that is exactly the case this week. And we are very excited to bring you a new segment. And it's kind of a funny name for it. We will call it The Public Defender, but more about that a bit later.
Well, as I mentioned, Richard and myself, PLD, that's right, PLD. We are on the Action Industries channel, the home of all things Ben Bateman and Andrew Guy, 2 great guys who are giving us our chance. So thank you for that, my friends. And they're responsible for such wonderful content as The Action Guys, which is now coming home to the Action Industries YouTube channel, and the Action Reviews, First Looks, and of course, a new show that they actually just announced. Well, at least said they're looking into or going to be announcing soon. We don't really know what it's going to be. That's going to be on Collider. I'm looking forward to seeing a third action show. I'm excited.
Yep.
But of course, they also are involved with Action Movie Anatomy, which is their flagship. They're showing the Popcorn Talk Network, which has over 200 plus episodes, well over 200 plus episodes now. I'm going to change that number soon, I think. And speaking
it's
of
like
that,
it's not like you read from a script.
What script are you talking about? No scripts. No. Anyway, what did they cover this week, Richard?
They covered 1917.
That's right, 1917.
That I can't wait for you to see this so we can talk about it. But it was a very cool episode. They really gushed about the movie, and Andrew's thesis, without spoiling the movie, was that this is the most beautifully filmed movie ever, which I thought was a very bold statement on his part. And the fist bump moments, well, when we're talking about historic war movies, it's not really a fist bump. It's more like a holy shit or a shock moment or an emotional explosion. There were lots of them. And yeah, definitely go check that episode. And if Paul is going to watch 1917 for next week, we might be doing our brief of the week on 1917 and probably pitch it up against Dunkirk. But that's still up in the air. Something to tease you about on for now.
Yeah, it's sometimes very rare that they cover a show that a movie that I haven't seen yet, that it hasn't really widely opened. That's opening this week, so I have to wait to see Action Movie Anatomy. So sad there's an Action Movie Anatomy out there that I haven't seen yet. It's ready for me. It's kind of funny too what I hear about it. I hear about all his praise it's gotten from like Ben and from you. Like the first trailer I saw, I was not that impressed with that. I was like, it looks like a little like Saving Private Ryan, not too big. But I keep hearing more and more like best
anything but Saving Private Ryan.
And I've never been a huge Sam Mendes fan either, to be honest with you. He's got some good moments, but I've never. Maybe I will. Yeah. We're done with Star Wars. That we have 3 Star Wars episodes in a row, all right? We could have 5 or 6. That's we
we'll always reference Star Wars.
Anyway, though, off that subject, let's get into before we get into our brief of the week. Why don't we hit that segment we just mentioned before?
Mm-hmm.
The public defender.
Why is it called the public defender?
Well, because we're idiots and try to name everything after a law, something law related. I don't know how this ever happened. It kind of developed in a weird way. Class action just sounded like a good name, so then we started making
like
everything
snowballing.
Everything has to be law related somehow. We're not even lawyers. We don't even know if these terms even make any sense, but they sound good to us. So we'll go with that for now. So the public defender, we figure, is going to be called. It's going to be basically something off the cuff. We're going to give each other a top five, or maybe not number, but top five something where we have no chance to review, research, anything. Just off the top of our head, we'll say top five, whatever, and then you're gonna have to come up with whatever we can come up with in this limited amount of time that we have. And hopefully,
like on the spot, no prep at all.
And hopefully some wild hijinks will ensue, and you'll probably yell at us because we'll be missing obvious choices. And yeah, it should be fun.
That's exactly the point of this segment, is to have these outrageous, like panicky picks that you just have to come up, because you have to fill all the spots. You have to. They can be as ridiculous as you want, but you have to fill the spots.
Now, no offense to any public defenders out there. I thought of that name initially as like the guy who's ill prepared. He's not paid enough. So he doesn't have the high. It's not the Johnny Cochran of lawyers. You don't have the high priced lawyers behind you. So that's what it made sense to me. Hopefully, no offense really meant. Hopefully, it takes the joke it's intended to be. But so this week's gonna be a little bit to debut it, since we kind of came up with it on the fly. We're gonna debut it where we kind of toss this idea out, and we're just not gonna think. We're not gonna think about it. We're just gonna throw them out. The first things that come up to our head. We're both gonna do it. Whereas usually from now on, every week I'll come up with one for Richard, or Richard will come up with one for me. We'll just do it that way. But this week it's gonna be both of us, and I'll throw it out there right now. Top five military command performances. We'll go back and forth. We give us a little time to research.
Yeah.
Why don't you go ahead? Go ahead. The first one off the cuff. What's your first one?
Okay, the first one. There's no other chance that it's number one is General Hummel, Ed Harris, General Hummel.
Now this is where it's weird too, because we're doing both of them. I shouldn't be able to use General Hummel because you just used him, but I can't not use Ed Harris. I've got to use Ed Harris. You know what? I'll take it, Luke. I will go with Ed Harris in The Phantom, where it's very apt this week because he's a Russian sub-commander in that movie.
I haven't seen that movie.
Him versus David Duchovny is not that great, but he's pretty good as always. So that's where I'll go with. How about go with your number two then?
This is maybe a panicked pick, and a safe pick. But honestly, after rewatching the movie, I don't understand how he could stay off my list. And it's Gene Hackman's Ramsey. That's what I freaking love Ramsey so much. I love him way more than Denzel's Hunter.
That's a cheap cop out. He's in the movie.
I know, but
cheap cop out.
But the rewatch, it's fresh. That's off the top of my head, so I'm picking Ramsey.
Well, I'm not going to pick Sean Connery because I'm not going to be that cheap. Let me see what I come up with. I got it. Jack Nicholson, Colonel Jessup in A Few Good Men.
Okay.
You can't handle the truth. You can't handle the truth. Yeah, he's an asshole, but it's kind of a great, fun movie. I love that movie. I've watched that movie so many times. So I'm going to go with Colonel Jessup. There you go. Number two.
Number three, I'm going to go with Hector from Troy. Hector.
Well, we're going way back there. Oh, that's good. Okay. From that wonderful movie with Brian Cox.
But Hector's freaking awesome. Eric Bona's freaking awesome.
No, you're right. You're not wrong. Okay. Let's see. Panicking. The traditional, the classic, George C. Scott and Patton. Just a poster alone.
Did you just read it? You looked down. Did you just read it?
No. You know what scripts I have here? I have like Hunt for October, Crimson Time. There's nothing about those. Trust me. So that's
Objection.
what I go.
Objection, Your Honor. Okay. So last one for me.
No, you got two more, right?
Two more.
Shit,
yeah. That was two more. Okay. What more war movies I like? Okay, Jesus, I'm not sure. Well, he's a commander of sorts. In Black Hawk Down, the dude from Saving Private Ryan, freaking shots are coming in, and he's like around the corner. The leader of the company of George Hartnett. You know his name? He was in Saving Private Ryan as well.
Yeah, I
know. And in Pearl Harbor.
I know who you're talking about. I can't remember his name. You know what? Let's look that up. We gotta look it up.
I'm looking. Give us yours.
Okay, well, I'll go back. I can't think of it at the top of my head. I'll go as Tom Hanks and Saving Private Ryan because we talked about that earlier.
Okay.
I'm a teacher. Real humanity there.
It's
that's
Tom Sizemore.
Sizemore, that's it. Tom Sizemore.
In Black Hawk Down, I think he's freaking awesome in that movie.
Okay, fair enough. And Tom Hanks is mine, so go ahead. And
last one, number 5. Okay, yeah, I know. 13 Hours. Roan. I don't know the actor, but he's the leader of the. It's not a SEAL. I think they're not a SEAL team, but the main group that's protecting the embassy. There's the leader.
Yep.
He's called Roan. I'm just gonna look up his actual name. He's not that famous of an actor.
No, it's not. Yeah,
it's not John Krasinski. It's not John Krasinski.
That's the one I remember from that movie.
Roan is James Badge Dale.
Okay. I don't really. I know the name, but barely. But yeah, I know what you're talking about. Okay, I do like him as well. Oh man, I got to come up with the 5th one. Okay, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna be cheap. You went, Troy. General Han Solo. It counts, baby. Military leader General Han Solo.
What is he commanding?
Return of the Jedi. He commands the forces on the Battle of Endor, the forest moon of Endor.
He doesn't command them. He just taps a stormtrooper on the shoulder and runs away.
Excuse me, General Solo. Is your team ready? That's what they asked him.
Yeah, I guess I gotta let you have it.
That's right. Oh, there you go. That public defender. It's gonna be a little bit
crazy. It's gonna be way better next week because I feel like because this week we kind of talked about the topic, but I didn't prepare. I just thought of like my favorite war movies and started going off that way. So
I actively just stopped thinking about war movies. I just thought about these two, and that was it. That's why I decided not to use these movies for that reason.
But Ramsey's so sweet, and we'll get into him as we dive into the brief of the week, and no better time for that. Or before we gotta mention at least the segment.
Yeah, we do have to mention the segment. This is one we do every week on this channel, and it's my favorite segment. What would Ed Harris play? Because damn, Ed Harris is sweet. Ed Harris is my favorite actor of all time. So what we do in this segment, we take a look at whatever movie we're talking. We're going to see what would Ed Harris have played in this movie, whether it be replacing an actor, or we sometimes get creative and write our own part for Ed Harris to play to make the movie better. Because Ed Harris will make every movie better. We all know this. Even Jake Yakovlet out there, you really do know it. If you search your feelings, Jake, friend of the show, search your feelings, you know it be true. But this week we decided that we didn't have a new show. We didn't really have a one certain movie we were reviewing.
Mm-hmm.
Quite frankly, this is pretty much the easiest one we could have done. Because Ed Harris could have played either of the captains.
Yep.
And done
and very well, I think. Very well.
Right. I think he would have done very well. I think
he could have. Sorry.
I think Ramsey. He would be even better. Ramsey.
I think he would be a better Ramis because I'm pretty sure anyone can do a better Russian accent than Sean Connery.
That's true.
That was just true. Oh my god.
But you can judge it when you see Phantom. If you ever go see Phantom, he's a Russian commander there. So that's his
right. Because he's not even like Connery's not even doing an accent. He's just speaking Russian in a Scottish accent.
He's a Scottish accent. We're going to get into that. Actually, that's part of the week. Actually, but
okay.
So let's get into it. Then, are we ready? Let's get into the brief of the week.
Let's do it.
All right. Well, we got 5 categories that are custom made every week. Some things sometimes are similar to each other because you get to the point where you love pitting up certain things. Like we usually have the better hero, better protagonist, that kind of thing. Sometimes we do better score. Sometimes we do better characters, better directing, better or something. We try to choose something that's appropriate to the films this week. And so we have 5 different categories, of course. This week we have better hero, better villain, but better captain. We actually changed it to better captain because there's no real villains that are the forefront of these movies. They're kind of all in the background. Or the
villain is war.
They're our country. Like it's like so.
War itself.
We have the better atmosphere. What I mean by that is, I want to know what felt more like like being in a submarine in the depths of the movie, kind of thing, getting involved. And there's a better. How does it feel to be in that
better set pieces and sort of the layout of the subs and
you describe it much better than I do, so thank you for that. The better threat. What does I mean? Like the better what our heroes have to overcome in order to save the day and win the war, so to speak, in this way.
Which pretty much, like, if you think about it, is the real villain of the movie. Is the threat's the villain.
That's a good point. We never actually speaking of off the cuff. That's true. If we wanted to look at that villain category, the threat is really the villain. That's a good call. And then the final category is the better sub crew. And this way, it's a better way to say better supporting cast, but we're going to limit it just to the crews of the USS Alabama and the Red October.
Go Bama. Roll Tide.
So why don't we start with better hero? Do you want to go first, or do you want me to go first?
I think I'll go first. I think, well, we're pitching Denzel against Baldwin. Both are on the list of my top actors. So this is honestly the toughest category for me from all of the rest. This is all time good.
Alec Baldwin.
Alec Baldwin, he's weirdly made his way up that list. It's like a 30-person list.
Okay.
But yeah, this really is the toughest category for me. Both of them are like relatively new and inexperienced for their situation at hand. Both of them kind of jump at the problem with like absolute surety. I think Baldwin is more like easygoing at first, but once he gets going, he's going. And Denzel definitely has some of the more like sweeter moments. He has some of the better lines, and he's like has a more commanding presence since he's the XO. But I think I'm going to wildcard this. Well, Denzel seems like the sure choice for me, but I think I'm going to give it to Baldwin's Jack Ryan because I can seriously see him, like, it's sort of like the adrenaline is building in him. And the moment is when he cuts the cord, when he's falling into the water. That's when he's unleashed. He knows for absolute certainty that he has to get on the sub, and he's all in. And he pretty much goes John McClane at the end of the movie against the cook. So I think he overcomes and overachieves what he's supposed to do in the movie. As if Denzel, he feels he has to do the right thing, and he tries to take over as captain or commander, or pretty much will take over the sub, take over the decision making, which is in the code of the military regulations. Pretty much, he can overtake if Ramsey in this case isn't following the rules. But I feel like Baldwin goes even further outside of the rules and overcomes, and that's the reason why I give it to Jack Ryan. Although I do love Denzel.
Okay. All right. Well, I will agree with you. I like the idea that they're both very, I don't know, inexperienced is quite the word for Jack Ryan, but he's definitely he's not experienced in terms of battle. It's true. He's very much that's one of the big clues of Jack Ryan. He's not the average action hero. He's an analyst that happens to get involved in these situations where he can't control himself. Whereas Denzel is just well trained but inexperienced in any kind of real situational combat or anything like that. Where that's where Gene Hackman's Ramsey is well more experienced. And that's where some of the conflict comes in. But as far as the hero situation goes, Baldwin is kind of interesting. It's almost a cheat for me because we've seen other characters play Jack Ryan. I have not seen the Amazon TV series, which I know you've told me is pretty good, or some people
really pretty good,
with John Krasinski. But I have seen, of course, I've seen Harrison Ford. I did see Ben Affleck.
Chris Pine
was the other one. So it's kind of weird having to see these different aspects of Jack Ryan, and Alec Baldwin, to me, always seems to be the weaker of the Jack Ryans, so to speak. So and it's kind of unfair to try to put just these two up against each other, but it automatically knocks it down for me in my head that he's not even my favorite Jack Ryan at this point. I mean, so I like Harrison Ford a lot. I mean, some will argue that Harrison Ford is just playing Harrison Ford most of the time, and that's true, but goddamn, I love Harrison Ford, so I can see him playing Harrison Ford in almost any movie.
What's the same thing with Denzel, pretty much. He's
always
Denzel.
That's true, but you love Denzel, too.
True.
Denzel is Denzel. I think he's a much better actor than Alec Baldwin is. Alec Baldwin's in his young prime there. I think Alec Baldwin works much better now in like the almost sometimes comedic, sometimes supporting character. Like his role in Mission Impossible was a good one though for him. That kind of role now. He's not quite as suited as Denzel is to take the lead. Also, Denzel has much flashier scenes. I feel like I don't feel like Alec Baldwin bumbles his way. Not bumbles is the wrong word. It's like slapstick, but he's kind of like he gets a little lucky with the guessing of
That's kind of why I picked him. Because he starts off that way, but he evolves.
He does. He does. And he has some comedic moments. But I love the Denzel he sticks to his guns the whole time. And that sequence where he relieves Ramsey of command and he just sticks right. And he convinces Cobb to get him on. I don't even remember the exact quote, but he basically takes over by the book. This is what's going to happen. That's the hero. That's who I want leading me at that point. Denzel Washington. I salute you for that. So I'm going to give it to Crimson Tide.
So we got 1-1. We got a tie.
1-1 tie. So now we'll move on to the better captain, as we say. This was probably the hardest category of them all, if I have to.
Really?
For me. It was, because I know it wasn't for you, because I know I already know which way you're going. But
I'm sure you do.
We got Sean Connery as Captain Marco Ramos, and we got Gene Hackman as Captain Frank Ramsey. Both phenomenal actors, both phenomenal presences, both phenomenal captains. They both have difficult choices to make, but they both make very smart choices generally. Although at the end of the day, Ramsey's choices were a little bit more rash. So I almost at this point was leaning towards Sean Connery at first, because Sean Connery's character ends up being the smarter of the two.
How come though? How come is he smarter?
Because at the end of the day, I think that if you look at it, he was trying to avoid war at all costs, whereas Frank Ramsey almost aggressively was going for it. Now, he made the smart decision and backed off when he was wrong, which I give him complete credit for. When he discovered he was wrong, it wasn't like a situation where he had to be too macho about it. He automatically went, "Yep, shut it down. That's what the orders are." He was almost too slavish he was so slavish to what he thought was right. And that's his training. But Marco thought outside the box. I don't know how he knew that this was going to lead to more chaos. And he wanted to help out to make sure that the Russians didn't get too much of an advantage over the Americans at that point in the Cold War. I thought it was a more smarter, long-term goal. So it was thinking outside the box, which all great leaders need to do more of. Ramsey got caught too far in the box for me at that point.
I got a question for you. I kind of want to challenge you. If you don't mind.
Shit.
Who does? So Ramius. Do you really feel like Ramius is trying to even the playing field, or is he more thinking about himself? I feel like he's making very selfish choices.
Well, part of the thing is, it's partially selfish. I'll agree with partial, but the idea. I mean, he mentions like John Oppenheimer and like the war about like once the nuclear bomb goes off, and he mentions that the aspect of it was he didn't want World War III basically to happen, and that's what he thought could happen if the Russians had the capabilities that they were going to have. So he didn't want any one side to have that kind of edge and that kind of power. So to me, that's a little bit of it's for selfish reasons, and because his of course his wife and everything else as well. But so I think it's a double-edged thing in a way at this point. Either way, again, he's outside. My main point of that was that he was outside the box, which I like.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
But even as I argue that, Ramsey's fucking sweet,
isn't he?
I love the guy. So I like the Gene Hackman to a T. Loud, obnoxious. I mean, but with point. He fights Denzel Washington with everything he has because that's what he believes in. I mean, as much as it is inside the box, he does believe it at 110%, and he's going to do everything he can to make sure that you follow what I tell you because I trust myself. And so I gotta give that a lot of credit too. So I mean, I don't know. God, Hackman's so sweet. So as much as Connery, I love the character. I love the idea that Connery's character was one that's not a typical antagonist, which is why he's not a villain, even though he's like the other side. His goal was a pure one. Ramsey just is too fucking sweet. I got to give it to Ramsey just for sweetness alone. So I'm going Crimson Tide. I'm going Crimson Tide there.
I'm going Crimson Tide as well. And Hackman, that was like the previous one was the hardest category. This is the easiest for me. And again, I started thinking about Ramius, and this is not against him, but in this sense, when I'm thinking about a commander of a U-boat and his team and his loyalty to his team, I feel like Ramius doesn't really care about his crew. He's only let in on some of his crew, like only the officers. He pretty much kills his XO. Ramsey will protect and go till the end of the earth for his crew. He is one with his crew. He's loyal to even the ones that don't agree with him, he still has a lot of respect for them. And he would never execute any of his crew. He does put a gun at one of the guys. I think it was Webs, Vigo, who he threatened, or the guy who fixed the radio. I can't remember that well, but the moment passed, and it was pretty much sure that he was only bluffing. He would have never blown his brain out. So I feel like Ramsey was the more of a team player and less of a selfish player, because he acted what he thought was absolutely in the best interest of his country. And I gotta say, I started watching Crimson Tide like a few years ago. When I did watch it, I was on the side of Denzel. Now I'm all the way Ramsey. I think he is the hero. Because these are his last orders. You go off from the last correct orders. If the order is incomplete, it's not an order. It's nothing. It doesn't count. It doesn't exist. You have to go off from the previous complete order.
I will say it's kind of funny because like I did see that movie that way, and I watched it. I'm like, well, I get what Ramsey's doing, because that is what he's supposed to be doing. He's doing what he was instructed to do, and how everything was set up that he was supposed to follow those orders. So I definitely agree with that. But at the same time, it makes it even more interesting movie, the fact that it was Denzel's was correct in the finale part of it. So it's interesting though.
And how Hackman sort of like, it's the final part of the movie, and they're waiting for the confirmation from they just reconnected the radio. They're waiting for the message. It's like super intense, and he just sits down and goes, so about these horses, sort of like defuses, just starts talking about the Portuguese horses and the Spanish horses.
Right.
And they're like, when they're born, they're black. There's sort of this like the way he talks and the way he demeans Denzel throughout the movie.
Oh yeah, they're very racial.
Sometimes Denzel knows it, sometimes he doesn't, but he's such a little shit to him. But it's so sweet. So this is Hackman, easily Hackman.
Okay, all right, I get that. All right, so we'll move on to the better atmosphere. This is yours to start with.
Better atmosphere. You know what takes the win for me in this situation is it's the sweat. It's the sweat. Everyone is sweating on the Alabama, and I'm totally stealing this from AMA, from Ben and Drew. Like all the Russian sailors on the Red October, they're pretty much they're like
cool as a cucumber.
It looks comfortable. It looks comfortable for them there. The set design though is pretty awesome. You can see that they made an effort to make it look Russian and Soviet-like. But in Crimson Tide, you almost feel the stench of the sweat and everything, the claustrophobic feeling. So, and it felt more realistic because of all of that. So, but the sweat, that's what takes it from me. Sweaty Vigo.
I hate to do this, but I'm going to say ditto, because that's exactly the kind of thing I'm coming up with. Dude, again, I also said it for Ben and Drew a little bit. It is this, but it also is the tense atmosphere that happens in Hunt for Red October is more of a ship-to-ship thing. A lot of times, like Scott Glenn, who also is awesome in Hunt for Red October. I love Scott Glenn as well.
Oh yeah, he is. Scott Glenn. Yeah,
he doesn't really fit many of our categories, but that so it was a lot more of the ship to ship. It's kind of it's almost detached in a way. It doesn't make you feel the tension as much. Crimson Tide, you're in that like tight. I'm claustrophobic myself a little bit, so you're in those tight quarters, and you know that your antagonist is like around the corner anyway, and it's. And the sweat is right there. You're right. I gotta say that I feel so tight. The tension that they feel is more apparent in Crimson Tide than it is in Hunt for Red October. I mean, you have like Viggo Mortensen sweating, not even figuratively, like not even literally, but like figuratively. Watch him on the side. You watch Cobb making the decisions of the whole. Well, I don't like you. I'm just doing what
you're going to the next category already.
Am I? Yeah, I kind of am. You know what? I should stop now. But it is the atmosphere. But that's part of the atmosphere to me. The atmosphere was that I felt more like the tense atmosphere in Crimson Tide. So I'm also going to give this one to Crimson Tide. So
that's like 5-1 for Crimson.
Yeah, 5-1 at Crimson Tide. So now we go on to the next category, which is the better threat. And this is the threat is the internal threat of the Alabama, where you have Ramsey versus it's Hunter, right?
Yeah, Hunter. Yeah, right. Hunter.
Ramsey versus I'm getting old, so I forget characters' names sometimes. I go to Hackman versus Denzel. But Ramsey versus Hunter. and the crew versus each other, but about the idea of, did the Russians load their weapons? Is World War III about to happen? What is the choice to be made? Do they attack and start World War III possibly, or at worst simultaneously attack? But then you put that up against, which is basically the idea. Basically, that is the idea of the Cuban Missile Crisis. So that's basically what it was, just done a few years later with the Americans and Russians there. But then the other side, you got Russia. The threat is Russia needing to stop the Red October from defecting. But it's also, interesting enough, it's the personal of Sean Connery's Ramius, who has to like convince his crew that that everything's going, that he's going to defect without his crew even knowing, in a way. That whole subplot sold me on it. I'm actually going to give this The Hunt for Red October as a bigger threat because, well, not a bigger threat, but a better threat. Because I feel like the bigger threat of the nuclear war aspect in Crimson Tide almost is overdone comparatively. Like it's probably the worst threat.
I get that.
It's how you see that more. This is a much more personal effect, which I think it's like a better threat for the film. I love watching Alec Baldwin and Jack Ryan have to. It's almost like Jack Ryan and maybe
Alec Jack Ryan.
Jack Ryan. Whatever. Jack Ryan.
Jack Baldwin.
If people want to say Captain Mary, so that's the problem. Captain Ramius and Jack Ryan are on different sides, but they're on the same side. That's what I say. There's two pieces. There's Russia, the U.S., Jack Ryan, Captain Ramius, and they're trying to work this thing out. So the stress levels are on the American side. Scott Glenn, who is not a bad guy, but does not trust Ramius and what Jack Ryan's saying. Then you got Captain Ramius versus, the cook, who doesn't do that guy, that fucking cook.
Actually, a pretty famous actor. He's always like the side character, but he's pretty sweet.
Yeah,
he's a gladiator as well.
Yes, that's right. I forgot. That's where I saw him. That's true.
It was the shit weasel.
Shit weasel, exactly. So, but at the end of the day, I like that as a more unique threat that you don't see. The idea is the Captain Ramius is not trying to go to war. He's trying to prevent a war. So I like that. Or actually, you're trying to prevent and defect. I like that as a unique threat. I'm giving it to Red October.
Interesting. You're almost convincing me to give it to Red October. The reason why I'm veering on Crimson Tides is from the start of the Red October, we pretty much realized that Ramius is trying to defect. I wish they cooked it longer, that we didn't know what his intentions were. I feel like the fact that Crimson Tide waited until the final part of the movie to reveal what the actual message was, that was what kept it so interesting. And the threat level, your adrenaline was through the roof because you had no idea if nuclear war had started or was about to start, and you just felt that it could happen. With the Hunt for Red October, I pretty much knew that if he doesn't defect, he gets sunk, and that's over. Nothing really happens. He just gets sunk.
But I would argue that the tension aspect comes from the fact that so they did reveal earlier on that he wants to defect. They made it pretty clear he wants to defect. The tension aspect comes from, well, how does he do it, and how does he get the job done without his crew knowing? Because he can't do it with his crew. So the idea that he gets them off, they have the subterfuge.
That was pretty cool. Sure.
There.
Yeah.
That was the tension part of the end that it ramped it back up for me. That's why. But go ahead. I mean, I'm taking.
But the threat that is okay. I'm like willing that they all die. Like in Crimson Tide's case, also if that sub got sunk, the war still could happen. They could have still blown up either the US or Russia. So I constantly I was stressed. I didn't know. So that was the threat level for me, which decided this for Crimson Tide.
Okay, fair enough.
I don't know. I tried to take the person out of this, and bigger impending nuclear doom was the deciding factor for me.
Okay,
but I do like your approach to Red October.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. All right, then we have one last category, and that is the better sub-crew crew of the Red October, with Sam Neill, Tim Curry, Peter Firth, Michael Weldon, and the crew of the USS Alabama with Cobb Walters, Viggo Mortensen, James Gandolfini, Steve Zahn, and even Ryan Felipe, which I kind of totally forgot.
Yeah, he was in this.
There.
He just looked at his aquarium.
That's right. So I can't remember.
No sailor would ever be allowed to take an aquarium on a U-boat. Okay, another thing. How is everyone smoking on a submarine?
That's a good question. They all do it, then, don't they?
Yeah.
Well, if I had to take my choice here, this one to me, honestly, is pretty easy for me. I like the Red October crew. I like there's some good aspects of it.
Neil's freaking awesome.
Sam Neill's great. Sam Neill's great, and Tim Curry's over the top. I love Tim Curry over the top as the medical officer. But again, the fact that the cook is unnamed and comes back at the last second to be the enemy in a way to try to stop the goings on. It just paled in comparison, because the USS Alabama was so heavily involved in the mutiny aspects of it. Mm-hmm. I loved Cobb Walters being the way he was. Guy was so loyal to Ramsey, and yet still works with Denzel, but lets him know, I don't
thank
like
you. Fuck you.
Fuck you.
You were just right in this situation. Right. And then Denzel goes, I thank you anyway.
And then James Gandolfini being the asshole he is in a way. But
yes,
also
Gandolfini. That was the deciding guy for me.
Yes, exactly. And for me, it was Vigo. I loved Vigo the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
He had that whole moment where he's not Aragorn at all. He's very not, I don't want to say indecisive, but he wants to do the right thing, but he's sweating the whole time, but he makes the right choice. It all comes back to sweat. This film's all about sweat.
It is.
So at the end of the day, I like the crew on the Alabama. I was more invested in the crew of the Alabama, whereas Hunt for October, it was more or less, I was more interested in Ramius, maybe a little bit of Sam Neill too.
Yeah, it was mostly Sam Neill, and spoiler alert, when he dies at the end, that's a strong moment, and that almost elevates it to take the category. But
if I include Scott Glenn, I might also bring it up, but I can't really, because he's actually not part of the October, but I do love me some Scott Glenn.
But yeah, so you're going Crimson Tide. I'm going Crimson Tide exactly for the same reasons, like Vigo and as Webs and Cobb. Yeah, exactly. Cobb's a freaking. He's a treasure, and Gandolfini, he has this shit weaselly look about him, and it's immediate that he's on Hackman's side, and he's just perfect for the role.
Loyal to a fault, and even the difference is like that's a big difference between Cobb.
Exactly.
Because Cobb will do what's right even if he hates it. But again, if he wouldn't care if Ramsey became like a Nazi, he'd be going, "Yep, he's my commanding officer. I'm going with him."
He has this look about him.
Let's face it, with the racist undertones, it wasn't as far off as you would think at that point. They're trying to make those points. But that's it then. We've come through our 5 categories. It's a resounding victory.
I was expecting this.
You were expecting this
because only one category was for Red October for me. Only Baldwin took that one for me.
I went back and forth. I thought it might against Connery. I like Ramius. That was a close one for me. I did go back and forth in the atmosphere a little bit, but overall, it was the sweat. I had to go back and forth and the threat, and I went with I went with Hunt there. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what I went with because 8-2. Crimson Tide.
And Crimson Tide, I rewatched this. I felt like this is one of those movies when you watch it, you say, this is the best movie of all time. This is sort of like when you watch Warrior, you're just like, God, this is the best. This could easily be the best movie. and it keeps surprising. It keeps you invested even though you know the outcome. So I'm not surprised.
Well, I was a little bit surprised, but in the day, I think both movies are sweet. I love both movies. They're both very good. I want to give Hunt for Red October. It's definitely its due. Watching it this time, I will say now that I think this was actually surprisingly the first time I actually saw the whole thing. Like when I was watching it, I don't remember seeing it in order. I mean, as one who's on cable all the time, I probably watched most of it all the time, but I actually sat down from beginning to end. I'm like, I don't think I've actually ever done this before, but it was really great to see that. So that's where we are. So I guess we should wrap this thing up. But where can the good folks find you there, Dick?
Richard-Erik Jarvi on Instagram and on Facebook, and go follow Action Industries on Instagram as well.
Find me at Paul _DiNuzzo on Twitter. You can also find me running the the Patreon of Team Action of Ben and Drew, www.patreon.com/Team Action. All sorts of tiers in there. Join the Action Army. We're a fun-loving bunch, let me tell you. Especially the Generals tier is great. Generals and above. We get a Facebook chat, which we've become quite close in that group. The Generals have become a really quite tight-knit group. And we get to talk to Ben and Drew before every live stream they do, every show they do. About 15 minutes before we get to do 10 to 15-minute chat about anything, about the shows they're doing, about life in general. It's great. It's really a lot of fun. So I suggest you guys take that into account. Also, you can find us both on Call to Action, podcast, which deals with the movie trivia showdown that Ben and Drew are involved with. I forgot to mention that earlier with that they're part of that movie trivia showdown, movie trivia with a flair of wrestling or UFC. Big season 7 starting soon in New York, which I am going to be there for. And so excited about that. But Call to Action, we do all sorts of reviews and reactions and all sorts of content on that as well. But that's where we are now, and that's where we will be. Next week, we said earlier, it'll probably be 1917 versus Dunkirk. Mm-hmm. I'll confirm that as soon as I've seen 1917, hopefully this weekend.
I'm pretty sure you want to do this.
I'm pretty sure I will too. So only problem will be if I got to find the time to be able to go out and see the movie because it's kind of a busy weekend. So hopefully we'll make it work. But otherwise, guess what? Court is adjourned.